sometimes years out, so the powers that be won't let me get my ideas out.
What's up, guys? It's Clayton Williams here. Welcome back to another episode of the Vivid Imagination Podcast. Today I have a very, very special guest on. He's an Arkansas commentator. He does a variety of different sports from football to basketball, volleyball, all of that. My co-host, Brett Dolan. Thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm a very, very special guest. That's at least one more very than I normally get. But it's always good to talk broadcasting, teams, games. So let's do it.
Yes, sir. I want to say again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. It really means a lot to me that we'll get somebody of your stature on. First question I have to ask, first of all, how are you? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. You know, this is a fun time of the year. We got the holidays coming up, but it also means we don't have as many games because it's finals week. Just concluded. The team seems to be in a little bit of a lull. The women's basketball team is on the road. We're waiting for some football games. So I'm used to going 90 miles an hour, and it feels like we've kind of decreased to about 10 miles an hour. But it's a good time of the year. It's just not as many games as I'm used to.
Yes, sir. And I wanted to get into. I want to learn more about you, learn more about your life. So starting off, my first question is, growing up, were you active in any sports, and how did you find your love for sports?
Yeah, I grew up in small town Iowa, so we played everything, whether that was baseball or basketball, football, golf, track. And we were all about the same caliber of athlete, which meant we were okay. We weren't great. We were never going to go play in college, or at least at a high level. So for me, I knew that I wanted to do something in sports. I wanted to be involved either in writing or broadcasting, and it became clear to me probably when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, this is what I wanted to do. So then it was a matter, you know, how do you get the experience? How do you get the education? How do you get started on your journey? And I feel like I'm still kind of learning and chasing and doing everything that I was doing 30 years ago, if not longer. But it was something I knew I wanted to do very, very early. And I guess I'm kind of fortunate that I've been able to make a living and have a career doing things that I enjoy. And they always say if, it's not work, it makes everything go a little bit easier. Yeah. So it doesn't feel like work to me, even though it has become a career. But I do enjoy and I do love what I do.
Yes, sir. And growing up in small town Iowa, what was your favorite sports teams growing up? Like, I know you say baseball was a favorite. I know you were a big baseball commentator. My mom's favorite teams were she loved the rivalry between the Celtics and the Lakers growing up. So what was your favorite team?
You know, growing up in small town Iowa, it was fun because I was a baseball guy. I also loved college football and basketball, so we were Hawkeyes, of course. Mm-hmm. But with baseball, it was interesting because we could pick up radio broadcasts and television broadcasts from the Royals and from the Cardinals and from the Twins and from the Cubs and maybe the White Sox or Brewers. So we got to hear 6 or 7 different teams, which was, and this was, I'm so old, this was before cable and before we had 100 stations. We had Channel 5 and Channel 8 and Channel 13. If we got a game midweek, it was special, or on weekends, maybe we'd get a couple of games. It isn't anything like it is now. So we listened to games on radio, and it was very good for your imagination and following teams. And baseball was my first love, but I've always been a big college football and a college basketball guy. So I was a Hawkeye. That's who I followed. I liked the Royals and the Cubs a little bit, and probably the Green Bay Packers, and really a little bit of everything.
Okay. And growing up, I know you mentioned having to listen to the radio. What about the radio kind of inspired you to get into sports broadcasting, being that you're not getting to see the commentators on the screen or actually see the action? Was it about the commentator's voice, or what struck you about just hearing the audio version?
That's a good question. I think radio is kind of the theater of imagination, because when you're in the middle of nowhere and you flip on the radio and there's a broadcaster coming to you from Detroit or from New York or from Dallas, it really allowed you to kind of get sucked in and think about, my goodness, how much fun would that be to be at that event, to be at Yankee Stadium when the Royals and Yankees were playing, at the Big House in Ann Arbor when it was Ohio State and Michigan. And I really think that allowed me to kind of dream a little bit. And then I love broadcasters that could paint the picture, because you're right, we can't see the games on radio, not like we can now with television. So we're at the mercy of whether or not these broadcasters are any good. Are they descriptive? Are they boring? Are they entertaining? Can they give you a little idea what it's like to be there and follow these teams? And for me, it was, I think, the creativity, the imagination that kind of sucked me in. And it was something that, again, that I knew I wanted to do. I wanted that challenge of trying to be behind the mic rather than being on the other side of the radio.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. I know you're a big Hawkeyes fan. How has Caitlin Clark's arrival in the, just not to veer off too much, but just because we're on the topic, how has Caitlin Clark's arrival in the WNBA? How do you think that affects women's basketball, and what do you think it's going to lead to in the future?
It has been a monumental shift in women's basketball because when I got my start when I was on campus, and this again is 30 years ago, the first opportunity I had to get behind a mic and call play-by-play was Iowa women's basketball. So I feel a connection to the program even though I'm several decades removed. I got to see them in Cancun, at least to introduce myself to Lisa Bluter, the former coach, and Jan Jensen, the current coach, around Thanksgiving. And it was fun for me because I thanked them for the joy that their teams in recent years had provided us. Because when you go from drawing 3,000 or 4,000 fans a game, which is a pretty good crowd sometimes in women's college basketball, and you're drawing 15,000, and your games on television, instead of drawing 80, 90,000, are drawing 2 million and 3 million fans, and people are lining up 3 hours early to get in the games when it's 5 degrees outside. It's amazing how much she shifted the popularity of women's college basketball. I think it will continue even without Caitlin. I do think she was kind of a shining star that only comes around every 30 years, every 40 years because of the game that she plays and how she draws fans in. But I do think some of those fans that came to the game because of her will stick around and watch the WNBA or watch the college game. For me, though, Clayton, it allowed me to be a fan, too, because I went to one game. She hit a 40-foot game-winning shot against Michigan State. I went and saw her play in Phoenix in the WNBA, and I got to kind of sit back and enjoy because every time I go to a game, even if I'm not working, I'm in the press box, I'm on the media row, I'm interacting with media members, I'm either preparing to call games or I'm calling games. I rarely get to sit back and just kind of enjoy it. And I made a point to do that with her twice because she's that comet coming through the sky that may not come around again for quite a while, and just fascinated to see the way she has changed that sport. I've been broadcasting women's basketball for a long time myself, and I was always an advocate and maybe an ambassador for the game, but she takes everything to a different level.
Yes, sir. Even with just what I really respect about Caitlin Clark is like the influence she's leaving for the younger generations, the women's basketball players that are aspiring and in elementary school, middle school, and looking up to her for the example she says. That's something that I really admire about her. What do you think the influence and impact that she will leave for the next generation?
I think, for one, she's an incredible competitor. And I think you realize you don't have to be the tallest or the fastest or whatever. How can you compete? How can you win? For her, it was seeing the game at a different level. She's always a step ahead sometimes when it comes to running the floor and seeing the open teammate. It's also the ability to knock down shots. I have some friends that broadcast a lot of games, and they really aren't big in women's basketball. The game's not played above the rim. You can't grab that loose ball and slam it through. Yeah. You get some missed layups, and there's some frustration. She proved that you can go out and knock down 25-foot shots. You can get points in transition. You can be a better shooting game than maybe the men's game is beyond 5 or 6 feet. And I think that excited people because there's young kids, and it's not just young women, it's young men. How can I go out there and knock down those threes? Well, it's practice, it's repetition, it's desire, it's dedication. And she had all of that with just this fierce level to compete. And if you have that, it doesn't matter what sport, what game you're playing, if you have that desire to work hard, compete, try and outdo other people, you'll probably be a success. And I think she showed a lot of young people that, listen, it's about how hard you play, how much you want to be good, and there's always that possibility that it could be that next person coming down the road in future generations.
Yes, sir. Being that we're on the topic of Iowa, I was gonna ask you, like, what was the decision? I know you came from the Houston Astros, I believe. What was the decision to go to a rival school in Arkansas to work for the Arkansas Razorbacks?
I think what intrigued me, and I was doing a lot of freelance work once I left the big league. So I was calling college football and college basketball, and that's men's and women's. And I was also doing some youth sports and maybe the occasional volleyball game or baseball game. But I really enjoy the opportunity to be with teams. It is something that I had done through my minor league and major league career. For 20 years, I was with the team. So you're with them every single game. You get to know the coaches. You get to know the players. I miss that a little bit when you're doing network games, when you're popping in and you're calling a game and then you're not coming back ever again, or maybe you're coming back next week or next month. So that was inviting, but also the way I think it gave me an opportunity to do more television and to do multiple sports. We're blessed in Arkansas. We have good teams, we have good coaches, good players, good fan support. But you think about basketball, and I know women's basketball, men's basketball, they draw a lot of fans and there's a lot of attention. Then you just fast forward a couple of months and you've got baseball, which is one of the elite programs in the country. You have softball, which has been one of the elite programs in the country as well, and a great facility and what Courtney Deifel and her staff have done. So there's really just this overlap from one season to the next. I call football my own, but we have volleyball and soccer, and that rolls into basketball, and basketball rolls into baseball and softball, and you mix in gymnastics and some other sports that we cover. To me, it was an incredibly busy calendar, but it's kind of the pace that I enjoy, and I enjoy doing TV as much as radio. And they allow me the flexibility to do some other events when I have something else come up on my calendar. So all the puzzle pieces for me kind of worked, and that's what made this situation a good one.
Yes, sir. That's very interesting. I appreciate you. We have definitely at Arkansas, we're growing. This is, for me, I always mention it. The Razorbacks, we don't have any, kind of like similar to Iowa, we don't have a major sports team. We don't have an NBA team. We don't have an NFL team or nothing of the sort. So we put all of our love and our attention into Arkansas sports. And as somebody who's had the pleasure of watching you work and listening to you work, we definitely appreciate you for coming down and making your presence known and making an impact.
I appreciate that. To me, there's a lot that goes into broadcasts, and you see it from what we do, from producing and directing and our students. But it comes down to creativity. It comes down to storytelling. The games sometimes can take care of themselves, and they provide great drama and highlights. Then it's our job, how do we caption it? How do we bring out the extra storyline or to make things even more interesting for the fans? And sometimes the game takes care of itself. We just kind of navigate a little bit, or we steer it, or we follow. But there's a lot of games too where it is a matter of us, how many stories can we tell that the viewer doesn't know? How can we make this broadcast or telecast more enjoyable? And that's what I really enjoy doing. I think that's where it comes down to, again, the imagination, the creativity, the storytelling. And it doesn't matter if you've done 10 games or probably 4,000, which I've probably done in my career. The goal's always the same. It's about storytelling. It's about adding or enhancing the viewership. And it's a challenge that never changes. It doesn't matter how many games you've done that week or in your career or how many different sports. And that's something that I think still drives me. And whenever it stops driving me is when I'll probably stop doing it. But I still enjoy that aspect of what we do.
Yes, sir. Being that you coming from Iowa and just to come down to Arkansas, what's something that you noticed about the community aspect of Arkansas and how much we get behind our team? What have you noticed about the similarities from Iowa and also kind of that southern hospitality angle that is apparent everywhere down south?
You know, it's unique because I spent a lot of time in Houston before I came here. I grew up in Iowa, as we talked about. Arkansas is kind of in the middle. So it's SEC as far as the region of the country. There's a certain passion that you get in the Midwest as well that I think that transcends. To me, though, I think it's just the support that the fans give to this entire athletic program. And you mentioned that there's no pro teams in the state. So it is about following the Razorbacks. And it's not just football and men's basketball. They follow all of these teams with great success. And the more that these teams improve and get better and draw fans in, the more the support increases. We've seen that with soccer and volleyball and softball and women's basketball, in addition to what we like with men's basketball, football, and baseball. So for me, I'm always attracted to schools that have great fan support. And there are some schools, and we can think about them, that maybe they're a great football school, but they're not a good basketball school. Or maybe they're a good basketball school like Kentucky, but maybe they don't have quite the allure when it comes to football. But when you're in the SEC and when you're in a state that doesn't have pro teams, there's a lot of sports. There's an opportunity for fans to get behind a lot of programs, and that's what I really enjoy about this region of the country.
Just to kind of backtrack a little bit, we were talking about how you discovered your love for broadcasting. How did you discover your unique voice? Because it's one thing to listen to somebody else commentate, but how did you discover? Okay, maybe I have something, a gift, with my voice and the way I'm able to project. Because that's not something that everybody has.
It's a good question. I hope I have a good answer because I think I listen to a lot of different broadcasters on radio, on television, local, regional guys, in addition to national. And I would say sometimes you enjoy or pull little aspects of what they do. Maybe it comes from captioning a big moment. Maybe it comes from filling time between big moments. Maybe it's accuracy. Maybe it's description. Maybe it's storytelling. And I've always tried to maybe pull or incorporate a little bit from different people rather than trying to mimic one individual or a couple of people. And I think when you listen to a lot of different individuals, you can do that. The challenge is, and this never stops, it doesn't matter if you're 18 years old or 28, 38, 48, 58, it doesn't matter. You still want your own unique perspective to come through. You don't want to be a copy of somebody else. Vin Scully was probably the best baseball guy. And there are people, when you listen today, you hear them on radio or TV, and you're like, well, he's doing Scully. And that's fine because you're emulating the best, but you're losing a little bit of your own personality and identity too. So sometimes I think, I'm still to this day trying to find that natural rhythm sometimes when you bounce from one sport to the next, when you go from radio on a Friday to football, and then another sport on television on Sunday, when you're going back and forth between sports and you're going back and forth between radio and TV. There's different calls. There's different voices that you use. I think the principles stay the same. But I will say it's not something that you kind of just find and then you just proceed throughout your career. I think it's something that you continue to work on and evolve to find the right pacing, the rhythm, voice quality. And then when you get an opportunity to call a game and you have a game-winning shot or a big touchdown or a big home run, are you rising to the moment or are you screwing it up? Are you getting too excited? Is your voice popping? Are you squealing or screaming? And it's one of the reasons why I always go back and listen to every broadcast that we do. It doesn't matter if it's radio or television. I'll go back, I'll review it, sometimes with a more discerning ear or eye than others. But it's always important for me to go back and monitor to see if I'm falling into bad habits or I'm making the same mistakes or I'm not descriptive enough. I'm not completing my thoughts. I'm not utilizing my analyst the right way. So it's always fluid and it's always evolving.
Yeah, within that, I want to kind of dive deeper into that. I was wondering, just when you on your own free time, you're trying to enjoy a game. And you're listening to the commentators. Do you ever get lost in trying to be critical as opposed to critical of the other commentators, or just simply enjoying the game? And when you're watching, how do you find that balance between I'm enjoying the game, but also I'm trying to take something from them, but also I'm listening to what they could be doing better?
All the time. I rarely just sit back and watch a game and view it as a fan because I'm constantly following what the broadcasters are doing. Are they doing a good job? Are they okay? Are they below average? And it's really fun to discover somebody new or listen to a broadcaster maybe I haven't heard before that's really doing a great job. And sometimes when you know there's individuals that you think highly of or are well respected where you can follow broadcasts and simply just kind of watch and observe what they're doing. Because you can always pick something up. And I would imagine it's this way in any profession. If you're an accountant and you sit down with the best accountant, you might pick up something that will help you. But I'm always intrigued by the stories that they're telling, the description they use, especially on radio, whether they're rising to the moment and accurately portraying big events on television. And I'm constantly doing it. And when you come across somebody that you don't quite like, it's frustrating because you're kind of thinking along with them. But it is fun when you get some of the very best to kind of sit back and observe and see how they do it. And while we might do similar things to these individuals, what separates the Joe Bucks and the Joe Davises and the Dan Schulmans is just their consistency and their ability to do it every single game.
Yes, sir. And we have a question from somebody within the RSN. This one comes from Max Honer. He said, "What's your favorite call that you ever made?"
That's a good question. Because again, I try and keep a running total of how many games I've done, and it's, there's probably well over 3,000 baseball games and probably 4,000 plus. I don't know if it's my all-time favorite, but I think I posted this on my Twitter a year ago, November, when we had the Iron Bowl and Jalen Milroe completed a 4th and 31 pass with 50 seconds to go. And
there's a lot of airspace to cover for Milroe. Still looking, firing, near corner. It's caught! Touchdown, Alabama! Bond, Isaiah Bond.
Alabama defeated Auburn because just the moment at Jordan-Hare, the Iron Bowl is always one of those big college games. We're not in a good spot in Auburn. We were at the opposite end of the field. You got the binoculars. You're trying to decipher it. You're trying to hit the big moments. I hope, though, that description and excitement and exhilaration came through in that call. So that's one of the recent ones that I look back on and really enjoyed. There were a handful of games with the Houston Astros. We had a 3-homer game from Carlos Lee. We had some big walk-off moments that I will always cherish and remember. But I think the most recent one probably was the Iron Bowl 2 years ago in Auburn.
Yes, sir. Okay, that sounds like a good one, a good example of one. Another question we have from somebody within the RSN that's kind of within that kind of realm. Hope Durkee asks, what's your favorite venue that you've ever called a game from?
I love Wrigley Field. When you go to Wrigley in Chicago and you sit back and you can, from our perch in the press box, you can see the lake off on the horizon in Chicago. You can see the rooftops. You've got the ivy around the outfield brick and the fence. It's a very special place, and we had some moments there. In my big league years, the Cubs were in our division, so that meant 2 or 3 trips every year. So we didn't just get one and have to wait until next year. Yeah. We were able to get sometimes 6 or 9 games in Chicago. I love Dodger Stadium. There's something special about Chavez Ravine. There was one time I was visiting with Vin Scully before the game, and I said, this place never gets old. I mean, this is so special. It kind of looks like it probably did in 1950 when it opened. And he looked out at the horizon and he said, you see the hue in the mountains and the grass and the vegetation. And he said, it kind of reminds you of Purple Mountain's majesty. And you look out there and you're like, wow, it is. It's a special place. And I really enjoy that. College football has been fun, though, Clayton, because I think I've been to about 75 different college football venues, and there's so many good ones. Yeah. I mean, Auburn is a great one. Georgia's fun. Alabama is fun. I love the Big House, though, in Michigan, because when you look around, it's this bowl. It's 110,000 fans. They're invested in the game. It doesn't matter if it's 20 degrees or 70 degrees. So I really enjoy the Big House when I get a chance to go there. Always loved Wrigley Field or Dodger Stadium. I did get to go to the Rose Bowl and call a game in the second to last game of the year with USC and UCLA, and that's pretty special too.
Man, that sounds amazing. I've never personally even been on a plane before, so just being able to imagine the descriptions of places that I want to go soon, I know I'm going to have to check out Wrigley for sure.
You're going to have to do it?
Yes, sir, and then definitely Dodger Stadium as well. So within your commentating career, I'm sure it's been many times that you've saw yourself on Sports Center or blew up on like Bleacher Report or something like that. What is your typical reaction to that, to hearing yourself coming from somewhere else?
Number one, first and foremost, is did I screw it up? I mean, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? And, sometimes we see our highlights posted. We know they're going to be on a website or they're going to get some traction. I think one example of what you're mentioning probably was a couple of years ago when Trevin Brazil had the dunk against, I don't know if it was South Dakota State, where he just went up and just landed on top of somebody.
The bulk of the minutes.
Brazil! My goodness gracious!
Whoa!
TB2, Trevin Brazil with the hammer!
Come on now.
That was an angry
dunk.
Come
on now.
And it was on SportsCenter's Top 10. Well, I went home that night, and I knew it was a big moment. It was fun. And I'm just watching SportsCenter, and there's the dunk with my call. And then they got a clip of Trevin sitting next to me as we asked him a question, and he had a quick answer. And, when you're going home after the end of the game, you're not expecting to see that. So that's one of those where it's still kind of fun because you're like, not only was that a lot of fun, and to see one of the best dunks I've seen from Trevin with his incredible athleticism, but then you're just simply going home and flipping on SportsCenter. There it is. There's your voice. there's, a quick image of you on screen with Trevin when he came over post-game to sit between us and do a quick interview. So things like that happen from time to time. It usually doesn't catch me by surprise. It usually doesn't overwhelm me because I'm used to it in some capacity, but it is fun. And when you get something that gets some traction, it's unique. And again, I think the overriding concern is, did I get it right? And hopefully I didn't screw it up, because you want to put your best foot forward on the biggest and best moments.
Yes, sir. And I'm sure you got it right. With how professional you are, how accomplished you are in this field. I wanted to ask you another thing, since we're on the topic of Arkansas basketball, specifically mentioned Trevin Brazile. What is your reaction to? What was your immediate reaction to Cal saying that he's willing to be a part of this Arkansas program?
It was a tremor that came through college basketball that I think everybody felt. And it doesn't matter if you were in Kentucky. It doesn't matter if you were in Arkansas or you were at one end of the country or another. This is a national championship winning coach. It's been 15 years with Kentucky, the bluest of the blue bloods in college basketball. And then to have him change was a little bit different. To have him come to Arkansas and put on the red and take over the program that Eric Musselman had really moved forward with a couple of trips to the Elite Eight, I think it was exciting. And for me, it's new, it's different. Obviously, I've enjoyed following Cal and kind of how he coaches his team. But we know one thing, he always brings in these incredible 4- and 5-star freshmen. And Boogie Flan's a good example. These players may not be here long. They may be off to the NBA. Boogie might be a lottery pick or a top 10 pick before all is said and done. But that pipeline that used to go to Kentucky with these just McDonald's All-Americans, incredible 5-star players, that pipeline's now coming to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Yeah. And he had a lot of success in this conference and in this league and with the Wildcats, and I got to believe it'll follow. The only difference, Clayton, is this league is an absolute bear. Yeah. Cal has said it before. When he came into this league, they were getting 2 or 3 teams in the tournament. So now they're talking about 11 or 12. That means what used to be a bad record in the SEC might now be a good record. If you're at 500 because of the competition that you're facing night in and night out, I don't know what that means when these teams get to the postseason in March, whether they'll be battle tested or whether they'll be fatigued from having to play top competition all along. But I know the one thing about Coach Cal is it's always an exciting ride, because the national basketball attention that used to come to Arkansas periodically is now here 24/7.
Yes, sir. We're talking about it and how Cal always breeds a certain kind of professional mentality within his players, because that's where he's expecting them to go. Now that becomes across the whole NCAA with the advent of NIL. How do you see that affecting the college landscape, and how do you already see that it's affecting us now?
It's affecting everything. And right now we're in the middle of college football portal season, so we get an idea that every day we're almost waiting for bad news. This player is going in the portal. This player wants more money. He can get more money. He's leaving. This coach is leaving and taking his entire roster with him. I will admit, as an old guy, I'm having a little bit of a hard time with it. I understand it's the new landscape, and I think it's been long overdue that players can make some money off their image and likeness, whether that means doing a commercial or an autograph signing or a clinic or an appearance. But we've gone from 10 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour with this as well. We're now at strictly pay to play, and it's highest bidder. I think the really special stories in sports over my lifetime have been individuals that have come to a school and they said, you know what? I didn't like it here originally. I missed home. I didn't like my coaches. I didn't think I was going to play. And then I stuck around. I got a little bit of an opportunity my second year. I was determined to make it work my junior year. And then this group stayed together, and we got better, and I got better, and we won a championship or went to the tournament or went to a bowl game. We're missing out on that right now. It's about, well, I was with Ole Miss as a sophomore. I'm in Arkansas as a junior. I'm going to go to Pitt as a senior. I feel like we're missing this continuity and this connection. And I wonder sometimes 15, 20, 30 years from now, when these guys want to go back to their alma mater, where do they go? I mean, which school do they choose? Do they go to their first school, their second school, their third school? And they are making some money, but that money is going to be long gone. And the memories and the life lessons that have remained for some of these players that came through a former era in a different world. I think they're always appreciative of sticking with it and staying in a program and making it happen and getting better and pushing yourselves. And I worry that we've lost that a bit. I think if you're an Arkansas basketball fan, you're excited because if there are dollars there and Cal can evaluate and bring players in, it should mean that you're bringing the best players in and year out. From a football standpoint, I know at times fans have been frustrated feeling like Arkansas is almost a farm system for Ole Miss or Alabama or other schools. So I think the jury's still out on how this is going to play out. We need some type of change, and I don't know exactly what that is. It's probably going to be collectively bargained, and there's going to be some limits on how often you can change or how quickly you can become eligible. May have to change the calendar because what we have right now is not going to be sustainable 10 years down the road. Players still need to be able to get paid or make money off their likeness, but something has to change. And I'm just so fearful in this void of leadership right now in the NCAA, it's going to get even worse before we can get better. And I hope not, because I love college sports. It's how I make my living. It's my hobby and my avocation and my profession. But right now, this is not a good road that we're headed down.
And we're having that conversation. Within that, how do you think it's gonna affect the player long term? Because I know if I would have got $1 million, even $50,000 when I was 18 years old, I would have maybe not messed up my life, but stuff would have went differently. How do you think it's gonna affect the player long term with this new NIL system?
It's a great question, and it's one I don't think we know the answer to yet, but I do think there are going to be cases where 10 years ago there was a player that in order to make some money and to help out his family was going to have to get to the league, going to have to get to the NFL or the NBA, and their singular focus was, how do I get better? How do I become a professional in order to make money to help out my family, put myself in a better position? Right now, they're getting that chance in college, and you're able to make maybe 7 figures if you're a really good player, a quarterback, or a great basketball player. And I wonder if a little bit of that desire to get better and get to the league goes away, because no longer do you have to be the best player on your team or one of the best players in the league to get a chance to make money, because you're making more money now than you will with an entry-level rookie salary in the NFL or NBA, minus the signing bonus. So I don't know. I just fear that there are some people that are going to be better off now than they will be in the future. But the real money that you make as an athlete comes when you've been in the league for 3, 4, 5 years, when you get to that arbitration, that free agency level. And I don't know if the desire to be elite will be quite the same, because you're making a lot of money now and you can get pretty comfortable cashing some checks even before you get to the pro ranks.
Yeah, I had somebody today that I follow on Instagram, like he went to my same middle school and stuff like that. He posted that he's gonna get 4 more additional years of eligibility, and that's interesting because, like, you can be the big man on campus, and I wonder if it's a kind of a fear thing or apprehensiveness, but also a comfort level thing. Apprehensiveness to try to take that big leap into the NFL or NBA because your comfort is here. You don't have to take a risk or try to be as bold or try to bet on yourself if you know that, all right, I got this money coming in from NIL and I got a guaranteed 4 more years. I don't have to go from being a big dog on campus to being a small pup in a big dog world.
Completely agree. I think there's a lot of players that will kind of fall in that situation because the NCAA, I guess it wasn't the NCAA, it was a judge who came out and ruled that Diego Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback, the years he spent in JUCO don't count towards his 4 years of NCAA eligibility. So if he had a couple of years in JUCO, and I think he had 1, all of a sudden he has another year or 2 to play at Vanderbilt. So we're talking about guys that'll be 23, 24, 25, maybe older, still playing in the NCAA because now they have more years of eligibility. And we talk a lot about student-athlete experiences. I get it. But now what about the 18-year-old or the 19-year-old? Is his path going to be blocked because we have guys that should have been concluding their eligibility years ago, still there? And they're there because, well, it beats getting a real job and you can make some good money doing it and you're playing college sports. I get it. But there are some people during COVID that actually redshirted in JUCO. They may have spent 3 years in JUCO or 2 and then gone to the NCAA. So now if none of those years count, you could spend 2 or 3 years in JUCO, come to a Division I school, redshirt in your first year, have a degree before you ever play. Now you're 3-4 years in before you ever play. You're 22 years old. You're going to play till you're 25 or 26. What are we doing? It feels like so much of this is broken right now, and the NCAA keeps getting their ass handed to them in the courtroom, and they're fearful of making any rule or regulation, and right now it is the wild, wild west. And again, I understand aspects of it, but I don't think this is sustainable for the long term in college sports.
Yes, sir. And we talked about 18 and 19-year-olds maybe not even having a place in because I saw Deion Sanders talking about it. Why would I pick up an 18-year-old fresh out of high school when I can just go grab somebody that's already played somewhere, that already has experience, that already has played with another college program? Why would I not just choose this experienced guy over the young high schooler or high schooler coming out of high
Yes.
school? Yeah.
No, there's no doubt. And I'll give you a college baseball example. The new era of college sports is we're going to change the roster limit. So Arkansas baseball may have had close to 50 players in the fall out there competing and scrimmaging. Next year, I think that number is to be 34. So now you've got to trim your roster, and you can no longer have quite the volume of players in there. So why would you bring in an 18-year-old when you can let them go play at JUCO for 2 years, and those years don't count against their eligibility? And if they're good enough, you can get them when they're 20 years old. Yep. And have 4 years of eligibility remaining, or whatever that would be in baseball if you get drafted, 3 years. At the same sense, why would I bring somebody in if I don't think they can play for a year or two when I can go in the portal and get a 22-year-old, a 23-year-old, pay them money, and have a more advanced physical athlete? So I don't know what this means for 18-year-olds. I don't know what it means for, well, I think I have a pretty good idea what it means for non-revenue sports. They're in trouble. They're in jeopardy because football funded everything. Now football's funding football. Football can't fund swimming and tennis and golf and whatnot. But at the same sense, there's a lot of sports, baseball, softball, for example, that had some big rosters in the past, which allows the coaches a little bit of flexibility. If somebody gets hurt, somebody doesn't hit, you've got others. You don't have that flexibility anymore. And I do think there will be a lot of kids 18, 19 years old that are going to be impacted in the next 2 or 3 years, and not to the positive.
Yes, sir. We were talking about how it affects the players. Now, question I'm curious to pick your mind about is how does it affect the pro leagues now with the specifically like the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, with guys that could be potential superstars that choose to hold themselves back so they can maximize their time in college. Like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of people like staying in their comfort zone. So the guys that might be potential superstars, all-stars, and I can cite a reference in the NBA. We're seeing the NBA ratings kind of go down. We're probably needing somebody to pick it back up, another superstar.
That's right.
Somebody like LeBron James to come in, another dynamite athlete to come and rejuvenate the league once LeBron's gone. These people might be choosing to stay in college for a couple more seasons just to enjoy all the benefits that they have there.
Again, I completely agree. I think basketball is a good example in the NBA. They need the next phase of superstars, not only to get to the league, but to kind of take over, to follow behind LeBron and what he's done. And I know there's some really great players, but you need that next infusion of talent. I think, and I could be wrong, and maybe basketball is the best example for this. I think if you're an absolute elite player like a Cooper Flagg, you're going to leave after 1 year because you want to get to the NBA. The point is, how can you get to that second NBA contract? How can you get 4 years in or 5 years before you get the really big deal that'll take you forward? At the same sense, what I think we're missing is that player that might be drafted late first round that could go to the NBA and bloom and be a great star. Because if he's not sure that he's going to be a lottery pick, why would he go and potentially have to spend some time in the G League if he could make 7 figures playing college basketball, travel around by charters, and not have to go through the minor league life or maybe go up and down between the NBA and the G League? And I think we always see a few players that are drafted late first round, early second round that become really good NBA players. Yeah. That's the caliber of player that I'm worried is going to say, I'll wait and I'll just cash my check here. But then if he gets to the NBA and he's 24 and 25 and there's a little more tread off the tires, maybe he doesn't have that potential to be the star that he would if he got into the professional ranks at 19 or 20.
Another question that I had, just off the top of my head spontaneously, with the conversation about NIL, what amendment would you make to the NIL landscape if you could?
I think what they hope to do is that when they provide money that comes directly from the schools, you're going to get your $50,000, your $60,000. It's going to be your paycheck without being an employee. Mm-hmm. And then if you are truly an elite player that can generate some money with an autograph signing, with a clinic, with a commercial, then there will be some type of established parameters where a commercial is worth between $10,000 and $100,000. An appearance is worth between $500 and $5,000. So we're not going to be able to come to you, Clayton, and say, here's $400,000 to come to our school and be a backup offensive lineman. That can't continue. Mm-hmm. There is no appetite beyond a couple of schools to do that. In other words, you're going to be put on full scholarship. You're going to get your $60,000. And if there is a demand for your likeness, your appearances, your autographs, you have the opportunity to go out and make more money. But we are not going to hand you through a collective $500,000 or $1 million. That is not the case because, again, you have to fund football. You have to fund men's basketball. Then baseball wants its share. Then there's women's sports where their top players want some money. And I think what we have to get to a point where there isn't constant turnover and turmoil. Mm-hmm. And what Sam Pittman discussed not that long ago is that if there are agents that are supposed to be representing players for commercial marketing opportunities, and instead they are calling other schools when they're not in the portal on their behalf and saying, if he was available, how much would you pay him? Oh, $200,000? All right, then he's going to walk into our coach's office tomorrow, say that he's not going to play if he doesn't get $200,000. He's going in the portal, knowing that he has that money with another school. That can't exist anymore because that's not what agents are there for. And when you're tampering and you're talking to players who are currently with one school, we have got to figure out how that goes away because all that does is just create constant turnover to the point where you can't even field rosters in bowl games. And coaches are leaving because they have to get to their next school to start this process of recruiting and portal season even before they finish out their year. The calendar doesn't make sense. The constant movement doesn't make sense. There needs to be some type of money that they will be guaranteed for being part of the team, their salary, if you will, although it won't be called a salary. And then if you are good enough to have an opportunity to make money on the side, feel free. Mm-hmm. But we're just not going to roll out and give you $500,000 because we are not going to be able to afford that long term.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Two more questions and we can wrap it up. One more is from somebody from the RSN, and this just goes kind of backtracking. Who is your favorite Arkansas baseball player ever?
See, Kevin Kopps probably goes to the top of the list because he went to the same high school as my son and lived not that far from where I did when I was in Houston. So I knew Kevin from the very beginning, even when he was injured and coming off surgery, long before he became the Kevin Kopps that we know. But Heston Kjerstad was a good one too because my first year of calling Arkansas games, they go to the National Championship Series. They're one game away from winning a national championship, and Heston was a freshman. And I think we all knew at that time he was going to be incredibly good. And we thought he had a chance to be highly picked in the draft. Well, he was the second overall pick by the Baltimore Orioles, so we were right. It's hard to even imagine that when you see an 18-year-old kid play in his first college game, that in 2 years, 3 years from now, he has a chance to be a 1-1 in the baseball draft and came out 1-2. So Heston Kjerstad was pretty high on that list, and certainly Kevin Kopps. But the one thing about Dave Van Horn's program, there's no shortage of tremendous players. And there are guys that we've enjoyed following that might not make our absolute favorite list that we got so much pleasure and joy from watching play because of their caliber.
Mm-hmm. Last year, I wasn't much of a baseball fan before. I never watched the MLB or anything like that. My grandfather was a big Baltimore Orioles fan. So I always used to see it kind of in the background, but never paid much attention to it. But something that I noticed when I started working the games and I started working cameras and stuff like that, I started being more intrigued by baseball as a whole. Then I would be at the Arkansas games, working the camera, and then in my free time, I would be like, since I understand more about the game, I would listen to your commentary in our headsets that we have. I would go back home and watch MLB games and watch college games, and that's something that really was interesting to me to become more of a baseball fan.
I love it. I think that's a great endorsement for our sport. And as someone who calls games, and to have someone say that as both someone who works and is also a consumer of the product, that excites me because I think it's a great sport. I know it's very different than football and basketball. There's something about football that fits into our calendar. It's once a week. It's a big deal. It's on Saturdays. We can prepare for it. We can tailgate. Basketball, we only have 2 games a week, and one of those is on the weekend, and half of the games are gone, so we're only playing 18 games at home, whatever that is. And baseball's a much more demanding sport, even from the major league standpoint. I think the most big league games I worked in one year was 199. And that's counting spring training, which was 30-plus spring training games and 162 regular season games. You better love it if you're doing 199 of anything over the course of a year. But I have an appreciation for baseball that might be different than others. But I think anybody who's below the age of 40, maybe who doesn't consider baseball their most favorite sport, I think that's fun for me to hear. And I think the one thing that we're lucky with at Baum-Walker Stadium and with Arkansas is it's a great venue. Mm-hmm. And from a television standpoint, we always feel like there's something. There's people wearing the funny hats, and there's people having fun in the hog pen, and there's people screaming at the umpires in the second row and wearing skirts and wearing hog hats. Whatever the case may be, there's no shortage of things to showcase and display. I think it makes a fun atmosphere, and I think sometimes people go for the atmosphere and then they get caught up in the sport.
Yeah.
And I think if Arkansas baseball has been able to do that in this state, more power to them. I hope there's other schools and other minor league and major league teams that can do the same thing, because it is a special sport. But I understand in this microwave society we live in, where having a game every single day, or in college 5 games a week, where it's too much. But I enjoy that.
Yeah, and another thing I think about baseball is it's kind of slower pace relative to the basketball, where it's dunking like 24/7 up and down a court, or a football where something spectacular might happen, or might be a big collision or something. Baseball is kind of slower pace. Even with home runs might be spaced out. It's not like just everybody's gonna come up and hit a home run. But once you, like you said, once you get involved in that atmosphere, you smell the hot dogs in the air, you hear the crowd chanting the historical music like "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," and even like you said, something special about Baum-Walker is I remember even firecrackers coming on after the game. It's outside, the community is engaged, and it just really drove me to be more interested in the sports that carried over to professional leagues.
Well, you're right about that in many ways, and it is a slower-moving sport. And I love football because of the intensity, or basketball because it's 2 hours, and you feel like you've actually played the game when you leave. And sometimes after a football game, you're drained because it's been an all-week build-up, and it's been 3.5 hours on the gridiron. There is something about being able to go to a game and kind of leisurely watch it, kind of get sucked into it, or soaking up the atmosphere, while at the same time understanding that even great teams are going to lose 45% of their games. And there is something about baseball that I think is like life. Sometimes you do everything right and it doesn't work out and it doesn't make sense. And sometimes there's a funny bounce or some spin on the baseball, or something crazy happens that you can't explain, that doesn't make any sense. And it feels like life, because we have moments that we're doing everything right and it doesn't work out. Or we get up one day with the best intentions and it goes south, or it goes sideways, and there is kind of that natural symmetry too.
Just for my final question, I know you've come into RSN several times and you talked to us and sat us down, and we're picking the students' brains. What would some advice that you have for anybody that wanted to go in broadcasting, to do what you do, or be a sideline reporter or something like that?
I think the one thing I tell our potential sideline reporters is be curious. Bob Holt passed away recently, and it was a tremendous loss. A longtime sports writer in our state who had been covering the Razorbacks for almost 4 decades. I said Bob had the talent of curiosity. And sometimes when someone wants to get involved and I'm testing out a student, I'm like, tell me something about our team or our players that I don't know. I feel like I know our players, I know our teams, but go talk to somebody and maybe you have an interest or a similarity or a common background. And can you tell me something from their background, their routine, their beliefs that I would find interesting? Because if I find it interesting, I think our viewers would find it interesting. So never lose the power of curiosity. But I think also get involved. Our students, for example, some will go on and work in this industry and some will do other things. And I get it. I tell them all, if you have RSN on your resume, when you're interviewing for that first real job, your employer is probably going to say, you worked in television and you were part of the Razorbacks and you ran cameras, or you worked in graphics, or you worked in the control room, because it's different. It's unique. It's an experience that goes on your resume that transcends just a couple of lines, because it shows that you have the ability to work in a high-pressure environment, that you can take something that people find as entertainment or a hobby and make it a career, whether it's part-time or full-time. And I think, to me, that's exciting. I think when people work for us and they cover the games, they could go on to really do a lot of different things because they've been involved in kind of our high-pressure situation, because there is an element of kind of landing a plane and air traffic control when you're on live TV, because you don't get an opportunity to erase it and go back and do it over again if you're writing, or edit it if you're doing something that's taped for radio or television. And you have to kind of live with it, and you have to kind of just get through the moment. But the one thing I think that also transcends not just a job is that ability to make it work, to make it happen, to get it done, to tell stories, to be curious, to entertain, to educate. I tell a lot of people that want to do what I do, how do you call games on television? And I say, well, why don't I simplify it? You can moderate, you can educate, and you can punctuate. As a moderator, you're kind of the host, right? You're the one getting everybody in and out of commercial breaks. You're the one reading the commercial copy or leading your analyst. Educate. I don't have to say that basket's good, it goes through the rim, you can see it. But what if I add that is the 5th Razorback to reach double figures, or that is a new career high? Am I educating? Well, I'm adding something to just saying basket good, shot good. And then punctuate is the fun part. That's the big moment, the Thero dunk or the Trevin Brazil follow slam. Can you hit that moment to where if people don't watch the game but they see the highlight on Twitter, does that give them some excitement or joy? So can you moderate? Can you educate? Can you punctuate? Can you tell some stories? That's all part of what we do. And even if you're not on the mic, but you're running camera, or even if you're in the control room, you're playing a role in all of that for the fans. And I know our fans love our teams, whether they win or lose, but you're adding to the joy when they win, and you're making maybe a better broadcast even in games where they don't.
Yes, sir. Just being in the RSN, I already got callbacks from multiple teams. I graduated in December, but one thing I will say about working at the RSN, it gives you a lot of great experience working in this field. And coming in, I didn't know what I exactly wanted to do with my degree, but starting to work at the RSN, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with broadcasting. I fell in love with the behind the scenes aspect of working the game. I already love sports, so it would just came like a natural hand in hand. And one thing I'll say, man, is like it's amazing. It's amazing getting to see how the game is formulated from top to bottom, getting to get all these amazing experiences that a lot of students will never ever get in their entire life. Being on those fields, being able to touch the basketball court, being able to just be involved in something that's bigger than yourself. And I'm always reflecting on that in my interviews, and that's something that they listen to intently. Like that's the first thing they say when they see my my resume. They'll say, "You worked at the RSN. What was that like? Which experience you gained from there?" And I gained a lot of professional experience, but I also gained a lot of positive personal experience that I can tell my kids about, and my kids' and will tell their kids about. But that's what I want to say. Overall, it was an amazing experience working at the RSN, getting to meet great people like you and Clayton and the whole team, Michelle. It was amazing.
No, I think that's a tremendous endorsement. And I would say the one thing about people. And I've got a son who's 22, and he just graduated on Monday from college, and he's going to work for the Atlanta Braves, not in broadcasting, on the baseball side and in the operations side. But I think the one area in our industry, in sports and in broadcasting, that has grown the most in the last 10 years, and is every team is their own, in essence, TV station and radio station and newspapers. We used to have to wait for the TV station to come cover a game and go put some highlights on TV. We used to have to wait for a beat writer to write a game story, and the next day it would be on your doorstep in the newspaper. Every entity, every team is their own broadcast entity, in a sense, because they can put their own highlights on social media. They can interview their players. They can make documentaries. They can make shows. They can make for a great experience in the arena or the stadium with what they do through the scoreboard and various creative ideas. They can augment their own broadcasts. And the young generation that's come through RSN and has worked in this capacity, they are well equipped to go work for any sports team, any college team, and contribute to their storytelling, their game broadcasts, their in-venue experiences, because that's been the biggest area of growth in professional sports, at least in my area of expertise, in the last 10 years. And I don't think it's going to slow down. So I think people like yourself that have come through and garnered that experience, you could go work for a team in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball or for a production company or for a network or for a television station and succeed because you've done a little bit of that already.
Yes, sir. I wanted to say thank you again to Mr. Dolan for coming on my podcast. I really appreciate you, sir. You have anything to say last thing to say to our viewer?
You know, it's been fun. I enjoy talking shop, talking broadcasting, talking with young people, and talking about sports. So we've kind of combined all of that
Yes,
into one long interview today. But I'll say it again. I think when it comes to your age, for example, and graduating, if you can do something you love, then it's not work. And there are a lot of people that go to work every day and they're grinding and they're trying to provide for their families and they're doing what they have to do, but maybe they don't love it. Maybe they're doing it because they have to. We're in the toy department of what we do. We not only enjoy what we do, there's a lot of people that look at us and think it's more of a hobby, and it is, but it's also our profession. And we love it. And it's what gets us going in the mornings, what keeps us going after long hours and working nights or weekends. But it beats working for a living.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes, sir. Thank you again to Mr. Dolan for coming on. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. More videos going to be coming at you. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.